Hello, everyone. Hello here, hello there, hello everywhere. So thanks for joining us for this talk about our project about the Great Brewster Journal of 1891. We're going to get started in just a bit. There's a lot of traffic around the library because there is a pet parade going on. And who doesn't love a pet parade? And a lot of people do. It's pretty funny. So we'll get started, but we really appreciate everyone coming by and to hear our story about the our work with this journal from 1891 of 4 women who went out to Great Brewster Island, 4 women from Lowell who went out to Great Brewster Island in 1891, spent 2 weeks out there, kept a journal of everything they did, everything they ate, everything they read, everything but their names, which was particularly interesting for us. We did know they're from Lowell. We did have the name of one of the person, but our project was organized to try to bring this journal to the public and to bring the journal in context so you could understand what's going on with these women. And we just found it was a fascinating little adventure. So we really appreciate you coming in. We're going to start the beginning right now. Let me emphasize that this project was really supported by the Friends of the Boston Harbor Islands, which is 40 years, 30, 35, 40 is 40 now, 40 years of service to the Harbor Islands. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but I just want to make that clear. So here's the logo from the Friends, and this is their mission. And it was really great that the Friends decided to fund and put forth this project. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about why we tackle this project and why it's a model for other people. We're going to do some background on the Boston Harbor Islands and on Lowell, a little bit on Lowell, a look at what's in the journal, a look at what's not in the journal and what we found, and how we set up our research process and our vision for the journal, because we feel like this is only the beginning of what can be done with this particular document. So some background. The Great Brewster Journal, it was a document that was found in a used bookstore by this gentleman, who you can see on the screen and up here, who is a Harvard professor, John Stilgoe. He looks like a Harvard professor, doesn't he? He's very distinguished looking. He's like, I think deep thoughts. Anyway, he was riding his bike in Cape Ann, and it broke down. He wandered into a used bookstore, and he found this document, journal, diary, album, sitting by the counter, and he immediately recognized it was of great historical consequence. And so he threw down his credit card and said, let's buy it. I'll buy it. Harvard will buy it. Let's get it into a library. He was afraid of it being chopped up and sold into little pieces. So he was the one who really discovered this journal. And it's only by chance he found it. And this is very interesting because there are very few journals by women that have survived. There are a lot of them out there, but very few of them survive. So this was a great thing. This is kind of what it looked like when it was first found. It was basically loose leaf paper with photos and entries put together. You can kind of see with the pencil, the reference to that. I wonder if we could close the last two curtains to make it really nice and dark and spooky, because we're in that spooky season. So it's very clear that this is a journal by these women from Lowell, and we're able to start doing our research on it. Now, here's the thing. The journal is actually in the possession of the Schlesinger Library. So it's at Harvard, at the Schlesinger Library. It's part of the Radcliffe connection. And so the Friends were interested in it because it had a reference to Great Brewster Island. Great Brewster Island is one of the islands in the chain of islands that are part of a very state and national park. It's a very unusual park. It's all islands. It's all water-based, if you will, or all surrounded by water. And the Great Brewster is actually in a grouping of other islands called the Brewsters, which you can see kind of in the lower part of your screen here. And the friend said, this is really interesting because we're here to promote these different islands. So that was part of the reason they got interested. By the way, here's a map of the Harbor Islands from 1891, or excuse me, right around that time. So you can see they're very similar in a lot of ways, but you can see that the shoreline of Boston was very different. There's been a lot of landfill. It's changed a lot. So really the shoreline is a lot different today. But here's some images from the journal itself. And I found out about this in about 2008. I got really interested in it. I looked at it. I've looked at it twice, the original, and I started researching it because there were some clues that I was able to look into. And Suzanne Gallmarsh, she's the founder of the FBHI. She was also intrigued. So that was the beginning of our journey. So what's in the journal? By the way, this is the frontispiece of the journal. And you can see that it is an illustration of 4 women, and with the code, ye square parti consists of ye autocrat, ye aristocrat, ye acrobat, and ye scribe. And ye autocrat saith, let us seek the seaside, there to wander idly as we list. Ye, kind of before Kanye did his ye thing, but that's okay. So what's in this journal? Illustrations like this. Well, they're daily entries. There's illustrations, there's watercolors, there's photographs, there's diagrams of the cottage that the women stayed at. They're landscape, portraits of the landscape that's capturing it, and quotes from the poetry, actually the books of the day. In a lot of ways, I compare it to a Facebook of 1891 because it has that kind of material. Here's what we did. Here's what I don't know if you see Facebook. Here's where we were on the islands. Blah blah. So it was that kind of document. But there are special things that are not in the journal. Context. It doesn't really explain that. Why were they on this island in the first place? Why did they choose to go there? Who owns the island? What happened after they left the island? And most importantly, no names. The women refer to themselves in the third person as the autocrat, the aristocrat, the acrobat, and the scribe, with 1 or 2 exceptions. But the most part is they did not identify themselves. They only identified themselves by their nicknames, which we thought, again, very interesting. We didn't understand why they did that. So here are some sample pages of the diary, and you can see they consist of writing, drawings, photographs. The thing about this journal, it's like a documentary. It's chronicling their living on the island. They've captured the experience and the landscape of Great Brewster Island. For example, here's the cottage that they stayed in. Here is the porch where they hung out. And even though that says July 19th, it should be 18th. Why don't we have our first reading? So 18th. I think we say 19th on the thing. Anyway, I want to give you a sense of what was in the journal. So do you want to come up and read from the 19th? 19th, even though it says 8. I don't know why, but I screwed up. Anyway, here is a sample. Here is a sample of what was written in the journal. And why don't you introduce yourself before we start?
Sure. My name is Anne Marie Allen, and I'm a member of the Friends of the Boston Harbor Islands, and I volunteer on Spectacle Island. And I live up in the Merrimack Valley, which is where the Merry Trippers were from. They were from Lowell, and I'm from Lawrence. And they were affiliated with the Mills, and I happen to be the daughter and the granddaughter of mill workers in Lawrence. So Sunday, July 19th, 1891. Again, a sunny morning greeted us after a rainy night, but clouds gathered early in the day and gave us some beautiful effects as they shifted from one quarter of the heavens to another, now shrouding the gilded dome in falling rain, now deluging Hull and Strawberry Hill. Soon after breakfast, a small sloop came to our mooring, and Mr. Wardrop, Mr. Cheney, Mr. McFarland from Boston came ashore, bringing us the Sunday Globe and letters to the autocrat and acrobat. After dinner, instead of our usual walk, we sat on the piazza and enjoyed the beautiful sunset which filled the sky and water with glory. And when the moon, almost at the full, appeared from behind the clouds, we felt that nature has shown us many of her varying moods on this day. We sat in the moonlight until late, discoursing as old friends will, then betook us to the dining room to read aloud a sermon on faithfulness, and then a half hour of Kenilworth finished our day.
So you get a sense. Now, by the way, when they're reading, understand they're reading out loud to each other. This was the equivalent of listening to radio or television. The reading was a communal experience here. They shared in the book together. And they documented the cottage that they were in with photos of every room and diagrams of the house. They've even created a house plan of it. For example, these are the bedrooms. They call them Ye Charming East Room, but they wanted to make sure there was a record of how they lived, where they stayed. There was Ye Kitchen. In fact, all through the book was all Ye this, Ye that. And it was kind of this pirates. It's like they were thinking of themselves as seafaring sailors or pirates. So they would use this expression. So here was Ye Kitchen. Here was the well that they used as a refrigerator when they didn't have ice. They didn't have ice at first for a kind of an ice box, but they lowered their food into a well to keep it cool. And this was a very important thing for them. One of the interesting things about Great Brewster is that this is a picture that they took from a spit of land or that emerges at low tide. So you can actually walk out into the harbor and look back at Great Brewster. And you can kind of look back at Great Brewster and you can see its very distinctive rounded shapes, the two mounds. And that's because these islands in Boston Harbor, most of them were created by glaciers. And there's something called drumlins. So glaciers, when they receded, created these drumlins, and then the water came in and drowned them. So this is a drowned drumlin field. And there's very few of those in the world. But this is their picture looking back at the island. You can still do this today. This is a picture, a modern picture, on that same spit, looking back at Great Brewster. And you can still walk out there. Just got to be a little careful about making sure you know the tide, and so you don't get stuck trying to get back really quickly. They commented a lot on Boston Light, which is the lighthouse nearby. Boston Light is the oldest lighthouse station in the United States, not the oldest lighthouse, but oldest lighthouse station. So they had a lot of reference to it. And we love this little illustration where you can see where the house where the lighthouse keeper stayed. And he'd actually come out and visit the women, and they would record that. Here's another postcard of Boston Light. Here's a modern picture of Boston Light. They also recorded something called Bug Light, which is a lighthouse that is no longer there, but is called Bug Light because it looks like a bug on its spindly legs. In fact, what's interesting about most of these pictures that I've showed you, with the exception of the spit, everything that I've showed you is gone, absolutely gone. Can't see it. The well is gone. The cottage is gone. A lot of the things they saw on the island is gone because things have changed so much in the history of the island. So what they were able to do is capture the landscape in a moment of time. Let's have another reading of July 19th. We could do that. Okay. Let's skip that. We'll go right to the Lady Brewster, who was a cow that lived on the island, who was this is Liz's favorite photo. She's going to tell you about this, Liz, about that. But she was called the Lady Brewster by the women. Let's go have another reading, and let's do the 24th. And Liz, could you introduce yourself and then read this sample, please?
Hello, I'm Liz Varela, and
I am so happy to have participated in this project. It's been fascinating. I'm a member of the Friends of the Boston Harbor Islands, and Stephanie invited me to participate in this project, which we really accomplished over Zoom during COVID. So it was wonderful to have something productive and interesting to do at that time. And it's been great to be able to meet people afterwards and hear of their interest in the islands. My background is in photography, the history of photography, restoring images and studying how they were made and so forth, just the history. But now I will proceed with a reading from July 24th, 1891. It is always an interesting moment, for at the appointed time, the light flashes from the lighthouse, the flag falls from Fort Warren, and the sunset gun booms. Music from the excursion boats in the harbor was wafted to us, and we could see the lighted trains of cars crawling to and from Pemberton around Point Allerton. And when the friendly lights gleamed all along the horizon from Crescent Beach to Minot's Light, we could not feel that we were far from the hub of the universe. Thank you, Liz. So you can see that some things are still the same. They still call this area the hub of the universe. Interesting. The cars they're referencing are train cars, they're not other cars. So, and today there are excursion boats that still go out in the harbor, and there's a sunset cannon that does go off. So it's kind of amazing that these traditions are still carry on. One other thing that we found really interesting was that every single meal was recorded, from what they ate to from the tea and coffee to the beginning, soup to nuts, basically. For example, their breakfast here was oatmeal, bacon, fried potatoes, corn cakes, tea, and coffee. Lunch, crackers, sardines, cheese, marmalade. Dinner, fried pork and eggs, baked potatoes, and rice pudding. They also tried to collect some food around the area, and I'm going to ask Vivian to come up and to read this section, which is from July 21st. Right here, you could read that, and why don't you move right over here, and why don't you introduce yourself and then read the section.
Thank you, Stephanie. My name is Vivian Borick. I've been in the Boston area for the past 50 years. And actually, 50 years ago, I was taking a humanities program at the University of Chicago. So I had some broad interest in the arts and culture. And now, 50 years later, I explored skills and curiosities and majoring in French and traveling all over France by myself in the past 20 years. And being an editor in academia, and also having the good fortune to find my mother's diary that she wrote in the late 30s and early 40s, and I made an album out of it. And so when this opportunity to become part of this project came, well, certainly it was a joy because it was during COVID. And I mean, anything would have been great, but this was just marvelous to work with the Stephanie's really imaginative and creative mind and her great skills.
To say that.
Yeah, well, I had to somehow pare it down. And really, the book was made with love. I mean, on the Zoom meetings that we had, people were really cared about getting the truth or getting more information or getting the right way. So it was just a joy for me. And so the circle is, I said, well, my interest in going solo to France and these women going almost, by themselves, which was unheard of 100 years ago, and then making a journal and working on it. I mean, and it is full circle, and in the humanities, where it's how culture and we are connected ultimately. So it's been a joy, and I'll go ahead and read the excerpt from Tuesday, July 21st of 1891. After dinner, the aristocrat and autocrat, with much preparation of rubbers, old skirts, pails, and spoons, went forth to dig clams for food tomorrow. The scribe and acrobat were left to wash dishes, then to meet the other party at the northern end of the aisle. to assist in bringing home the clams. With regret, they left a ruddy sunset and soon found their friends with light pails, cut hands, and long faces, but no clams.
So we've kind of talked, we kind of shared some of our stories about why we got involved. I mean, we gathered a group of women who felt a kinship with these women for various reasons. Vivian, because she had traveled solo and she had a diary she looked to. Liz, because interested in the photographs. Anne Marie, because she's interested in Lowell and also in that area and also in the Harbor Islands. So we gathered a team. These are all volunteers who met regularly. This is after COVID, by the way, this thing here. If you didn't guess it, we gathered a team. Mostly we gathered on Zoom and had meetings, and I tried to pick a really unflattering photo here. I really didn't, sorry about that. But anyway, we gathered, it's hard to get a good photo on Zoom, I'll tell you. But we gathered and we had meetings and we discussed how we were going to bring this diary, this journal to the world. And the first thing we did was to transcribe it and annotate it. Two very important points. It was all written in script, so we had to go through and look at the handwriting and transcribe it so that people could read it. And that was a job. And even now, there's some things we couldn't quite figure out. We also annotated. In other words, if somebody made a reference to something that we didn't understand, we looked it up. We found the information. So we created the context for the journal entries so that you would understand what they're talking about when they said Kenilworth, or if they said we played Halma, which is a board game, or about the food that they ate. We created a Google document, a Google folder, and we gathered information. We gathered a lot of information about the times, about Lowell, about the Harbor Islands. We kind of put it all together. And then, as I said, we researched things like Halma, but we really got into some of the food. And one of our parties was really into Rochester jelly cake. What the heck was Rochester jelly cake? So she not only researched it, found recipes from about that time period, but we include a recipe for Rochester jelly cake in the journal because we want to make sure everyone can experience Rochester jelly cake, of course. To our eyes, the women looked dressy, but they frequently mentioned how they are wearing casual clothing. I mean, this was the equivalent of shorts and a t-shirt, the way they talked about it. And so we thought that was very funny, the way they kept talking about how they were dressed down. So we researched the fashion. Vivian did a great job in researching the fashion of the day, sort of contrast what did women actually wear when they were out in public. There were many, many references to poetry and or literature. And they would just have the reference. They wouldn't say, oh, this was by so-and-so. They just put it in there. The same way we quote something today that we think everyone will know what that's about. We went to the trouble to see if we could find out what they're actually talking about. And thank you, Internet, we were able to really identify that they were quoting Lord Byron. They were quoting John Greenleaf Whittier. They're quoting Lucy Larcombe, who's very interesting because she was a mill girl who became a poet and a teacher. And since they were from Lowell, we found that to be quite interesting that they would quote her. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, obviously they quoted her. So we found that to be interesting as well. But we had to identify the women. This was the hard thing. We had pictures of them, well identified with their nicknames, but we didn't know who they really were. We were able to do this because one of the women was actually identified only because a note was found in the journal when it was purchased from a Charles Nichols, who mentioned that this is an account of Great Brewster Island. They're friends of his mother's, the scribe, Miss Helen Whittier. So we knew the scribe was Helen Whittier. So we were able to find a lot of material. Helen Whittier lived an amazing life. Helen Augusta Whittier was actually a lot of information about her. We found this particular article that talked about her involvement with something called the 15 or the XV Club, that had a number of members. They even listed the names of the members, and it even mentioned the trip to Great Brewster in this, although it said that there were 9 members of the club went there, and we knew there were just 4. We found that was very interesting. So we had names of these club members, and we figured out some of those club members must be the people on the trip. So we did some work in trying to line them up. We are very much helped by this. We made contact with Martha Mayo, who is a historian in Lowell, and oddly enough, she was researching the journal. We were on parallel courses, and she had actually established the women who she thought the women were with this, and had created some ancestry diagrams for them, because she felt she knows Lowell, she knew the women from Lowell, she knew a lot of things, so she really became part of our team and really helped us up. One thing that we were aided in too was that there were some initials in the journal on pictures: BC, BC, and HAW. Well, HAW is obviously Helen Augusta Whittier. BC really threw us for a while until we realized that was Isabella Bella, who went named Bella Coburn, who was ye artistic acrobat, and we kind of show her in this picture drawing something. So wow, that's a pretty good clue. So we're pretty sure that she was the artistic acrobat. Helen Frances Ray French had a birthday that matched up, I believe that was her, matched up with a birthday that they celebrated on the island. So we were able to say, okay, she has a birthday on this day, they celebrate her birthday there, that's probably her. And then with a little more sleuthing, we believe that the gentle aristocrat was a woman named Elizabeth Lizzie Dean Adams. That's her married name, because Adams, her uncle Adam Dean, what was this first name? Why am I blanking on that? Charles Dean? No. Benjamin Dean. Yes, it's memory strikes. Anyway, Benjamin Dean was actually a very prominent lawyer in the Boston area. He actually owned the cottage. He didn't own we don't think he owned the island, but he owned the cottage. He was very much involved with the yachting in the harbor, and they were visited in this diary. They had mentions of the people who visited them on the island. So we believe that Benjamin Dean had something to do with that. So he was related to Lizzie Dean. And that brings us back to the scribe, Helen Augusta Whittier, who, as we found out, lots of material about her, art teacher, she was a photographer, avid promoter of women's clubs. She was very much involved with that. And she was also an entrepreneur. She helped to manage the Whittier Mills, that's her family's mills, including its expansion into a mill in Atlanta. And she became the head of the mill when her father and then her brother died, and she managed it. This is very unusual. So we found a lot of references and discussions of that. So she was a president of the Middlesex Women's Club. She represented Massachusetts in the St. Louis World's Fair. And later on in life, she traveled extensively. So we were able to find out a lot about her. We were not able to find out a lot about the other women. For a lot of women's lives, they kind of lived in obscurity. So while we could find out a lot of things on Helen, the others, we just know kind of the barest details of that. And part of it is because there was a book written about Helen Whittier after she died. Here's a picture of the Whittier Mills that she helped to run. And here's a picture of what's left, the mill today, which is a housing complex now. So now we began to do another task, which was to try to identify the writers by their handwriting. One of the things that we found was that at first we thought there are only two writers. You can see one with this distinctive script and one with that script, but with a closer look, and one of our team members, Allison Andrews, really did a lot of work on this and identifying who wrote what. And we with some sleuthing, we were able to see that the handwriting took turns. There was one and then another and then another, and then it started again. So it was a rotation on it in terms of the writing. And because of clues in the writing itself, we kind of figured out who wrote what, because if you're writing about somebody, we kind of figured you wouldn't be writing about yourself in a certain way. So with a lot of work, Allison really went through the handwriting. I was able to identify the different handwriting, and like I said, different sequence of that. And let me just say something about that. One of the things that was mysterious to us, and we still don't quite know, is when this diary was written. Obviously, parts of it were written on the island, but because of the photos, and Liz is going to talk about the photos, because of the material in that, they couldn't put the whole diary, the whole journal together on the island. It had to be kind of assembled and recreated afterwards. So we weren't quite sure if that was meant to be, we kind of think this was a project meant to be shared among the women, maybe even a public document for members of the club. But part of that was the mystery of the photos. And maybe Elizabeth can tell us a little bit about the photos here. These women began using the very early snapshot camera produced by Kodak only 3 years before this journey. They were at the transition between formal portraiture and formal photographs taken with view cameras in a large format with glass plates and tripods, transitioning to a more spontaneous, accessible, intimate form of photography that allowed one to literally take a box, fill it with film that had 100 exposures, take your 100 photographs and send the box back to Kodak in Rochester, whereupon it would be developed, printed, reloaded, and sent back to you. So this round form of photograph was done with that Kodak #2, one of the very first snapshot cameras ever. The rectangular photographs that we've seen throughout. Yeah. This rectangular or square, as the case may be, they would have been cut. Photographs were also done with a Kodak, most likely, but even the greatest experts in the world were not able to say definitively which camera took these photographs. In the case of these photos, they could have been developed by the women themselves, because at this point, there were developing kits, and many of the photos reflect the beginner's mistake here and there, streaks of light or thumbprints of developer on the side, little flaws that show that the people developing them were not professionals in Rochester, but someone trying to learn the process. And Helen actually belonged to the Lowell Camera Club. She may have been the one who initiated this and taught the others. I think there were more than one person taking the photos, because you see different styles. For me, what was very fascinating was the spontaneity that one sees on the steamer. And you'll see, if you look in the book, there's a beautiful image of Pemberton Pier in Hull. You can see it's a slice of life. It's a round photograph, so done with that handheld box. But it really shows the activity and people carting luggage, people well-dressed, beautifully arranged and composed. And really, you didn't have time with that camera to compose. in the sense that now you look at an image, you have a viewfinder, you can see what you're looking at and how you frame it. In those days, you had a triangular little apparatus at the top that allowed you to point at something and imagine the way it would be framed. You also had a challenge in taking interior photos, which they did, but in those days, you had to, with your fingers, open the shutter and estimate the number of seconds that the light would come in and form the image on the light sensitive silver halides that resided in the film, and then get it developed. And by trial and error, hopefully you will have made a very nice interior view, which they did. It amazes me that they were able to do the living room and the bedroom, and to be able to see those details. I love the Lady Brewster because it's one of the few close-up portraits that they did. They didn't photograph each other except for that, the one that you already have seen, that shows at a distance, maybe one in a hammock, the other reading, someone sewing, somebody with her head down. But in terms of personal portrait photography, they were not doing that. Maybe they were camera shy, but with the Lady Brewster, they aimed at her, made the eye contact, and produced a beautiful image. These, I think, are very interesting for what they include. The perspective. I think it's a beautifully composed photograph. Many of them did not survive in terms of deterioration over time. I mean, they've been in an album. The paper in the album undoubtedly contains sulfur. It starts to fade the silver in the image, so that you do get a nice brownish tone, but often it fades so much that you lose the detail. You just get yellow and brown, and you don't really get to see what they saw initially. But I think they did their best to follow George Eastman's motto, you press the button and we do the rest. They used a box that I actually have, if you can see, a fold out here that shows you the size of the camera, the box camera. And it had, as you can see, a key on the top to turn to the roll film. It had a string to pull to cock the shutter. It had a button on the side to press the button and take the picture. And of course, there's the lens, which one had to open and shut for a time exposure while anchoring it on a bureau or a table, a support. This type of photography was supposed to have freed people from the tripod. And I'll end by just saying, George Eastman, when he first started to learn about photography, he was a bank clerk and he wanted to go to Santo Domingo, and he decided, well, I'll investigate, take a course. And he said, when he saw the tripod, it was heavy enough to support a bungalow. And the rest of the equipment was so daunting that he said, there has to be a better way of doing this, something where everyone can be a photographer. And he liked the letter K, so he named Kodak, a name easy to remember that would begin and end with the letter K. A weird little bit of trivia, but there it is. Acquiring a Kodak, as you can see here, a gift worth having. It became something very, at first it was expensive, of course, $25, which today would be $700. But gradually, the camera became more economically feasible for more and more people, and it became marketed mostly to women and children, to scouts, to people who were interested in sports and camping, and to use in family situations, graduations, weddings, the way you would use your phone camera today. So I enjoyed this research very much and spoke to people who collected photographic memorabilia from Kodak. There are many ads that feature the Kodak girl, and we're seeing a couple of them here. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. In fact, one thing I'd like to mention about how these cameras were used as phones. I know we like to complain today that people like to text too much. They can't be separated from their phones. But these women, what we found references in the diary was that they wrote letters every day and found ways to get them posted. And they received letters back and forth from different people. So they get the Globe delivered, they get their letters delivered, back and forth, they get food delivered. So they weren't really cut off as much as you might think. And in fact, someone might say that they were glamping, not camping, because of all the amenities that they had. And one of them was to continue to get letters from their friends and other people. But all this material, we had gathered all this material together. It was just so much fun gathering it all and then putting it together. We created this book. Here's the cover. And this is the table of contents, because the one I want to show is that we had information about the women. We had information about the Helen Augusta Whittier. We have information about the city of Lowell, women's clubs, because we feel like if you understand that, you'll understand the references in the journal better. Why Great Brewster Island? We put in history about the islands and then what happened afterwards. And one of the things that we think we have some theories about why they adapted those nicknames, and it was because they probably were leaving their real life behind, even though they were glamping, not camping. They adopted new identities because they were no longer the fancy women. They're probably, middle class, upper middle class, maybe even upper class. They were married. Two of them were married. Two of them had children. They were older. They were like in their 40s. These were not young women in their 40s. So they were able to leave that life behind, and they adopted these nicknames as personas, as someone that they could be outside of the restraints that we think of life for 19th century women. So that was our theory of why they adopted those nicknames, which were very, very poignant in terms of how they could put things together. And let me grab this. So to celebrate our conclusion of getting the book together, we had to deal with the history press before we went into it. We got it in. We went to Spectacle Island, and Marguerite made and brought a Rochester jelly cake, which we're enjoying, which we're eating and enjoying right here, which is really quite good. So that was a lot of fun. The book is now available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon and your local bookstore. Think about visiting the islands in the summer. It's closed for the season now, but in the spring, you can start visiting, getting out there. You can also look at the Friends of the Boston Harbor Islands website to get more information about all the islands out there. And I just want to conclude by reading the entry from the last page of the journal. This is the last page of the journal, and this is the last entry. Friday, July 31st, 1891. At 10:30 a.m., we said farewell to our enchanted isle, so difficult to reach and so hard to leave. Turning our faces to the workaday world, we leave behind us the uneventful, idyllic days, like no others in our lives, with their placid serenity, their pleasant spice of labor, the unruffled happiness of accustomed comradeship, and all the glory of sea and sky, now only a winter fireside dream of dawns and sunsets by the summer sea. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer them. So thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
I just want to comment. Well, thank you so much. It's
Okay.
a wonderful collaboration, really.
Thank you.
Really excellent and really impressive for a friends group too.
Yeah.
Really, But I'm so struck by this slide. I'm so glad you ended with it. Because I have two pictures that were drawn by my grandmother when she was a teenager.
Mhm.
And I think must have been in the 1890s, because they're exactly the same style.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And she was from dairy farm outside of Hartford, Connecticut, but at some point she moved to Brooklyn. I don't know when where she was when she drew the picture.
Hmm.
But I just think that the typography, of the print and the style of the pictures must have been a thing for
I-
these women, in those days.
I would say so. I mean, these were well-educated for their day. They're well-educated women. They couldn't go to college. Women didn't really go to college in those days, maybe a few, but they didn't. But they were well trained in art, and they're well trained in literature. They read a lot. Their handwriting, for the most part, was pretty readable. So yes, and they would have been very affected by. And these are the fashions of the day. So yeah, that's very interesting. Where's in your grandmother?
She
was-
spent most of her life in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
She was a teenager when she drew these pictures, and they were
interesting.
family gathering. Well, one was a family holiday gathering,
Uh-huh.
religious holiday, and the other was, I don't know, fisherwomen. I think she probably copied one of them from a magazine.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
she
Very
was a
interesting. Yeah,
teenager.
yeah.
But the style is,
Fair.
immediately struck me as, oh, those look just like my grandmother's drawings that I now have framed in my house.
Very cool. Very cool. Yes, question here.
In the glory days of Boston Harbor, you were able to camp on the islands, including Great Brewster. My family has camped on Great
Yes,
Brewster.
yes. Mhm.
Even out to Cab. So I think my question is answered. The cabin was between the two peaks on Great Brewster.
Yes, we think so. In fact, I have wanted to go. I haven't been able to get back to Great Brewster now that we've really studied this to really look at it, because all of it is gone. All of it is bulldozed. The well is gone. The cabins are gone. There were more cabins built there afterwards. So I would really love to go there and really scout it out, because it's kind of hard to tell, but it looks like it was between the two drumlins there. And in some pictures it looks quite large, in other pictures it looks quite small. So it's a little bit hard to tell. But yeah, I love going out there. I love Great Brewster. Actually, Great Brewster right now is in pretty sad shape, in the sense that it's not been maintained. The paths aren't mowed. It's pretty overgrown. So because the Park Service, because of the pandemic and other things, it hasn't been kept up. So yeah, hopefully the friends will sponsor, maybe next year, maybe we'll figure out a way we can sponsor a trip to Great Brewster and do a lecture about the book, and then go out to Great Brewster and see if we can see what we can see. But that would be very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So I feel like I'm sort of hearing two stories here. One is a story of the women who went to Brewster and married, and then the story of you all who created a project.
Right.
And that just intrigues me.
Well, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
And no, and I'm curious about that group. I'm more curious about like how you all came into it. See, we get to ask you the questions.
Well, let me invite our panel up, our people to come up here and say something about that. So if Vivian, Liz, and Anne Marie could come up and just say something about why they did it a little bit more, that would be, I think that might answer your question and how they were, yeah. So I'm going to let them speak, and I'm going to take a break. So.
Oh. So my first introduction to the diary was from a meeting of the Friends of the Boston Harbor Islands, and Stephanie gave a presentation, and I saw these watercolors and the photographs, and she started to tell the story, and I became interested in that. And then when we started the project, this was something that was really something I think we have an innate curiosity about how other people live, and we want to kind of, look through the windows and see how they've decorated, and what are they eating, and how do they prepare their food. there's a lot of questions left unanswered, like, where did they go to the bathroom and things of that sort that we'd all, you think of what would you be experiencing? And so I think that helped to answer a few of those questions that we had. And so when this project came about, we weren't really sure, what our contribution would be, but once we started reading the transcript and a couple of us started doing the transcribing, and we had so much fun doing it that we stopped because we wanted to allow other people in the group to have the experience that we had of seeing kind of close up what the women were dealing with, because you paid more attention when you were doing the transcription. And then you'd come across things that you didn't know what they were talking about. The flowers from Mr. Dean's garden. Oh, well, who's Mr. Dean? And we played Halma. What the heck is Halma? So, thank goodness for Google, but we were able to find out a lot of things that way. But so it was fun with every person bringing their own expertise. So, Liz, your expertise.
I also had seen Stephanie's presentation. I think it was at the Old South Meeting House many years ago, and found it very intriguing. So when Stephanie invited me to participate in this project and drawing on my photographic background, I said yes with enthusiasm because, and I'm so glad I did. It's been a lot of fun. And how often can you say that you had work during the pandemic that was actually fun? So I'm grateful for it. I found the photographs, as I said, very more than interesting. Those that are technically deficient are still very interesting for their content. So I enjoyed working with them and trying to preserve them in this way. Seeing them published and shared among people is a great way to preserve something that otherwise would have been isolated, perhaps in a library, not looked at in the same way. So with that, Vivian.
Yeah, we call this.
Mary Trippers too.
We call ourselves the Merry Trippers. They call themselves the Merry Trippers. We called ourselves Merry Trippers as well. We didn't use it as a title because it has other meanings now.
But I do address my emails to Dear Mary Trippers too,
Yeah.
with the two. Okay, I'm Vivian Borick. I share some of the points that have been brought out. Again, and during COVID, I had just retired from my editing job at, with the Commonwealth at Mass Health. And I don't know about you, but I really need to have, the idea of having something to work on that you love. And it wasn't that I missed work, but I needed to have something that I loved in addition to my France travel work that I organize and work on presentations. And so you can imagine, well, in my experience, here it was, I live in the old school building with tall ceilings, me and my two cats at that point. And to have this opportunity, I got an email from the Friends of Boston Harbor saying that they were looking for people to who are interested in editing this intriguing new book. I said, oh, my eyes jumped open, and I, petted my cat and said, wrote an email saying how qualified I was. I was an award-winning editor. I worked for both at Harvard and BU, and I found my mother's diary from the 40s, and I made a transcription of it with pictures. And whatever. I don't know if I told about my France travels then, that I related spiritually to the nature of these women in their outgoingness. For whatever reasons, they took these 2 weeks of a different environment with different identities. And I somehow got an email that says, okay, something was going to happen. I was part of the group. And I learned, because most of the women were long-term members of the Boston Harbor Islands. And I mean, I've been here since the 70s, and I do know them, but I was more going to the Arboretum in France over the decades than the Harbor Islands. But I always loved nature, and so I mean, it was part of my world too. but I was so glad. I was so glad to be, I mean, at that point, I was so glad to be chosen, because I don't know how many of you have looked for jobs. You don't always get what you think you qualified for. So, so that happened, and I thought it was going to be just editing, but the opportunity came to write some text. So we were enhancing the 40-page journal with our own research on topics that would be interesting to a current day reader. And despite my music and art and humanities background, somehow I got really into fashion and as a senior. So I was very happy to do that and do some research. And wouldn't you know, when I said about the connection, what did I start? The first book that I got out at the library was on how France basically was the start of our fashion and of our elegance and fashion comes from France. And this is, you know, I couldn't have found a better book on my interests personally than how this one brought me to it. So it was just fascinating. And that I really more than noticed, I was awed by Stephanie's ability to see what was in the future, because she also has written books by herself, and to make this a team effort and answer your perception or your opinion was really, to me, another aspect of her imagination and mind, how to put this all together. And I mean, getting the book, I have to say, I thought it was really beautiful, and I love reading it, and I'm so proud of it. And I really think it, you know, so many people should read it. And yeah, buy it. It's always nice to have your own copy. You can mark it up and copy it, and, you know, write your name on it and things. So it was just you know, the having the meetings during the solitariness of COVID was important psychologically, and I mean, it was just something nice to look forward to, a group of minds, women's, and share working on the same project. And then we got to meet each other finally, like a year later. We went on a boat cruise, and so I'm very thankful for it, and I'm very happy to use my retirement money to buy copies to give gifts to anybody I'm giving a gift to. So that's been my thing. So thank you, Stephanie, and everybody.
Let me just see, are there any questions online?
Question online.
Yeah.
Just repeat it. I think it's a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah.
Don,
Okay.
perspective for today. Somebody wants to know if you know anything about the dog in the sketch. Are there any
Oh, do we know
photos?
anything about the dog in the sketch?
The dog parade.
We do, yes. We don't know. We've been very mysterious. We find that dog very mysterious. There's no reference to canines or dogs and anything, so we don't know. We don't know where the dog came from. It's very cute. What?
You can see the owner apparently, the leash that she's holding.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be somebody's dog that she brought. Well, why the dog is dancing, I don't know, unless there are treats involved. So, but we don't. There's a lot. Let me frame something. There's a lot about this guy we still don't know. We had about 2 years to do this. This diary you could spend 10 years on it for like a master's thesis. In fact, we hope somebody does. We hope that this is a document that can be used in women's studies programs in colleges, that they could look at that and start delving into it. We also think there may be other diaries of other trips to Great Brewster out there, because there was a reference to another diary, another journal, I should say, another log of another trip. So there's more out there. We're hoping by getting this book out there that things will come forward. There's something in Cleveland that Martha found that there's a journal. We haven't been able to get over there to Cleveland and to look at it, but we really feel like this is not the end. This is a start of research for women and men around the country to look at maybe diaries in their own family, and to look at what they can extrapolate from this particular document. So I hope that answers the question. So anyway, so we're going to end here. Thank you so much. We're going to hang out with our books for sale. There's food. So we'll hang out for a few minutes. So thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it. Take care.